Welcome to the Uncensored Unprofessor, a podcast where I want to think more deeply with you about Christian faith and life. Hey, all you believers, non believers, unaffiliated believers, sort of believers, and you think I'm a believers, welcome. Welcome to the Uncensored Unprofessor. This episode is about movie watching and movie analysis. Good day. Thanks for joining me. First, I want to let you know that a few days ago I went to the cardiologist for an EKG. Now, don't worry, nothing's wrong with my heart, although the doctor said it looked rather dark and black in color. But the truth is, it was just a checklist matter to clear me for back surgery. On Wednesday, January 31st at 7:30 in the morning, I'm scheduled to go in and have 2 discs and 2 rods removed from my lower back, and then they're going to put some pins in through some vertebrae and do a fusion. Because the truth is that over the last 17 years, I've endured stiffness and pain. I was in an automobile accident 40 years ago that led to this, but it's been especially bad, say the last couple decades. And once a month or so, I feel sciatica, which is a shooting pain or cramping down one of my legs or even into one of my feet. And my surgeon says I'll be in the hospital 2 nights dealing with pain for a few days, but then, if you can believe it, walking 2 to 3 miles per day about 2 weeks after the surgery. So while I'm a bit apprehensive about the surgery, I have been under general anesthesia 11 times before. I was counting them up. I'm also at the same time very hopeful about having a fresher start to my physical life. The doctor says, and so did the doctor down in Newport Beach, California, that something like 80 to 95% of my daily, weekly pain and stiffness will be gone. Just gone. So any and all prayers will be appreciated, and I've scheduled podcasts to be released during my recovery, and so I appreciate all of you, and thank you for caring, and again, thanks for your prayers. Now, for today's episode, I want you to know that for the first 30 years of my adult life, when people would ask me what my favorite movie was, I would always answer the very first Star Wars movie. Now, to you Star Wars freak geeks, that was Episode 4, A New Hope, which was released in 1977. But to me, that was the original, purest, and bestest episode ever of Star Wars. And my choice for Star Wars being my greatest movie ever for 30 years had to do with the effect that movie had on me and American culture, and really even on the global imagination. It was really significant. I remember being 16 years old and waiting in a line that wrapped all the way around the theater to see it. It was so exciting. The special effects were then mind-bending, but even better, the storyline was engaging, charming, exciting, and charged with both thoughtfulness and integrity. Now, when I was a teenager in the 1970s, the evangelical church was wound pretty tight. Going to movies was then a suspicious activity, an activity charged with potential damage to one's spiritual walk. My parents didn't much let me go to movies, especially PG-13 or R-rated movies. Our church pastor was absolutely convinced that if we went to the movie theater, we could miss the rapture. And if I actually did go to a movie, I would sit in the theater, half afraid I was going to be left behind with all of the other sinners. Well, my wife Tanya and I raised our kids a bit differently. We did let them regularly go to age-appropriate movies. Wow, it can really take some resolve to be a good parent, right? Mom, Dad, all our friends get to go. Why are you so strict? Why are you so worried about us? This isn't fair. Please? Oh my goodness. God bless all of you out there who are trying to maintain appropriate boundaries, trying to be mindful parents. God bless and strengthen you. But Tanya and I tried, I think with some success, to teach our kids to watch movies with their brains turned on. We would ask them questions about the movie after they saw it. We'd get them to engage the movie at a deeper level. And instead of merely just counting the number of swear words or whether or not the movie favorably presented or favorably touched upon Christianity or the church, we would talk together about the movie and try to go into deeper levels with them while we ate meals or had snacks with them. Here's something worth pondering. Why are movies so powerful? And I think it has to do with the fact that we human beings both love good stories and visual images. Oh, please, church, wake up about the role and place of aesthetics. Pastors, you're missing out on fostering a more profound effect for Christ on your congregants by ignoring aesthetics and beauty. Movies have that two-pronged effect, story and visuality, and they affect people's imaginations profoundly. For my entire adult life, because I've watched so many movies, and I don't know if it's because of James Bond movies or Westerns, but I don't like sitting with my back to the door at restaurants. I'm not kidding. Even before 9/11 and the whole ensuing TSA fiasco of every airline trip, right? Even before 9/11, I was uncomfortable being vulnerable with my back to the door. Now, this didn't always make Tanya happy, having to change places with me at the booth. But I tell that goofy little story because movies shaped the way that I behaved out in public. I didn't like having my back to the door. I'd seen too many movies where bad guys come inside shooting. Quickly but importantly, thank you. I want to pause and thank Courtney S. and Device GR for sharing UU posts and links with friends on Facebook. Those are a real blessing to the program. Also, I want to thank Hannah M. for pledging her monthly support to me on Patreon. There are a couple exclusive, dicey, more personal episodes each month for Patreon supporters who give $5 or more per month. And that premium member amount is going to go up, but for now you can get in for $5. Please consider even $1 or $3 pledge per month. And just so you know, I'm not using that money to get rich. I'm using that money to pay for equipment and web page design and web hosting and RSS hosting and advertising and other promotions because we really do want to make a cultural footprint and edify the whole church. Back to movies. Something like 4 to 7 times per year for 15 years, Tanya and I had students over to our home, and we'd have them eat snacks with us and watch movies. And it was a great way as a professor for me to get to know a dozen or so students in one evening and to try to help them to think critically together about contemporary culture. And then in my intro to philosophy classes, I would assign 3 required papers a semester. Each paper, they had to evaluate a movie, and I had a list of 20 or so pre-selected movies. And I think the students enjoyed those assignments because it helped them to see how movies can be pervaded with philosophical commitments and themes. By learning how to watch movies, I wanted my own children and my college students to recognize when different values were being suggested or when a theme was coming at them, and it often can happen in a clever but covert manner that might challenge or even undo some aspect of their Christian identity. But I also wanted them to be able to recognize something as good or true or beautiful even if there wasn't a Jesus bumper sticker pasted onto it. So I say all of this, my friends. I want you today to be critically minded with respect to culture. And sometimes you might be surprised at how a movie actually affirms elements of the Christian worldview. And sorry, just one last disclaimer. I'm not claiming to be original on movie watching. In fact, years ago I read several books, some of them were more helpful than others, on how to watch movies. Some of them were written by Christians, but several of them were just written by movie buffs. And some of those books helped me to look for the nuance or for angles I hadn't previously considered. And I can tell you this for my interest in movie analysis, that I love going to the theater even more than ever, though the flip side, I confess to you deep from my soul, I'm a movie snob. Badly done movies are like nails on a chalkboard for me. On the other side of it, though, subtle movies can move me to tears in vivid fashion. So I love the excitement of going to a movie and see what they're going to do. So with this episode, I thought it might help you to learn how to watch a movie or to learn how I watch a movie. Here's this first a point on method. Get a soda, easy ice, and a properly proportioned popcorn, yes, with butter. Although I got to tell you, I just had lab results for a blood draw for this surgery, and my cholesterol's a little high. I'm sure it's too much movie theater popcorn butter. Get there in time to watch the previews. After all, it's your duty as a movie critic to know what's pending. Get a good seat. I like to sit one seat in from the aisle. That way I have an empty seat to one side of me. But then those floor lights, if I'm in one seat, they don't reflect off my glasses and distract me. Because as a glasses wearer, it can bug me to have those lights off to the side. So there's my stuff about method. Now I want to think more analytically with you and tell you the things that I look for. And number one, the thing that I watch, look, pay attention to is the philosophical frame. This one isn't always easy to determine, but it's really important because it's good to ask what worldview is being shown or presented to us. And some movies show us what life is like inside that perspective, while the movie makers themselves are not committed to that perspective. And sometimes they can be exploring what it's like to be inside of a perspective like that, which can be really fun. So philosophy, for example, is the movie emphasizing human emotions and feelings? Are feelings king, like they are right now in Western society? If that's going on in the movie, I know I'm getting a movie from a romanticist perspective. A movie that comes to mind from a romantic perspective is Pleasantville. It was released in 1998. It starred Tobey Maguire and Reese Witherspoon, and the characters in the movie lived in a world where everything was shades of gray, pretty much like a 1950s gray, black and white TV show. And as the characters in the movie began to make decisions based on their feelings, and chiefly their feelings were about sex and race, they began to become colorized. And the movie showed us that they were realizing or actualizing themselves through their emotion-based decisions. And then very cleverly, they were showing how we should all be moving from the 1950s into the 21st century. So there was a clear criticism of the plain and old and stupid traditional past that was going on in the film. And the truth is, it was a very clever sermon. Excuse me. It was a very clever sermon on behalf of romanticism. Or fairy tale movies and cartoons are often giving us romanticist perspectives. They not only play on our emotions, they suggest to us that emotions are the most important human quality. Excuse me one second, drink of water. The cartoon Frozen to recall a movie my granddaughter has been watching incessantly for 6 months. It's a 100% sermon on romanticism. Feelings are the deepest, mostest, truest vehicle for relationship and meaning. That's the message that came through loud and clear in Frozen. Or is a movie simply showing us a matter of doing what needs to be done in the given moment? Maybe a pragmatist perspective is being offered. Brad Pitt's movie, World War Z, from 2013, exemplifies a very pragmatist philosophic bent. The whole let's find a cure team in the story, they were doing anything and everything to get done what needed to be done. Pragmatism is the only unique American philosophy, and it's a very direct, very targeted way to carry a storyline. We Americans love getting stuff done, and sometimes movies are straightforward, pragmatist in their focus. Is the movie emphasizing the main character or main characters' self-awareness? Then perhaps an existentialist worldview is the agenda. And just for your information, this is the most common philosophic genre for movies right now because awareness is a fun theme to play from and to and through. Awareness, coming to being, growing up, maturing, is a super easy way to play to the viewers, emotions and sensibilities. Maybe one of the most famous existentialist movies of all time, which is one of the greatest movies of all time, is Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. The entire film had to do with the coming to consciousness of humankind. Both that hominoid creature at the beginning who threw the bone up in the air, and then later on in the movie, that long orgasmic flourish. It looked like a psychedelic trip that lasted some 9 solid minutes. I don't know what a psychedelic trip looks like, but that looked like it for 9 solid minutes in the movie. Both of those were used to portray the grand move into a new epoch of human existence, human consciousness. Existential themes are huge in movies. Maybe the movie is suggesting to us that life is meaningless. Does the story take the main character, and then we with them, on some gauntlet that finally winds up being pointless? Recently, on a prior podcast, I reviewed the movie 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. It blows me away that it just won a Golden Globe. It just shows how far apart my worldview is from the people who voted the Golden Globes. Because despite all the fun and surprising twists in the plot line, in the end, the story was about nothing. And its message clearly suggested that nothing matters. And when nothing is the resolve, the conclusion, we can know we just watched a presentation that worked around or played with the philosophy of nihilism. And there have been more of these kinds of movies in our postmodern age than ever. Fargo from 1996 was a very nihilistic movie. Or in 2007, you may have seen it, There Will Be Blood, starring Daniel Day-Lewis. It was dark, and in the end, we learned very little about life, except that it doesn't much matter. I'm okay with nihilism if it's done right, but I don't like nihilistic movies that have me believing or supposing to believe that it's all about nothing. So try to look for philosophic framing. That will greatly help you understand and appreciate, or not, the film. Of course, that presumes you know some philosophy, so maybe you need to go out and buy a simple book that surveys the different philosophic schools. One that I've used is The Idiot's Guide to Philosophy. It reads easy, and it doesn't get bogged down too much in the overly technical nuances inside of each philosophic school, the philosophy of a movie. Secondly, when I watch a movie, I'm looking for the values. So what do I mean when I say values? Here are some examples. Freedom, which has always been a huge theme for Western movie history. Human rights, love, however defined. Peace, trust, fidelity, survival, awareness, maturity, the abuse of power, relationship, goodness over evil, beauty, money. Man, we could make a long list. Movies, stories. Movies work best when there's a theme that they are exploring, whether positively or negatively, or a theme they're suggesting. Now, I have to warn you, a movie's theme can turn into a sermon. And me, I can't stand movies that are thinly veiled sermons. Be aware. Be on your toes. Turn your brains on. Recognize when you're being played in a too plain or too obvious manner. Don't be unwittingly duped. What are some examples of movies that were sermons? Well, there are the totally obvious ones like the new from 2017, Kevin Sorbo, Let There Be Light. It had fine intentions. It wasn't that badly acted, but it was so straightforward, so lacking in nuance or subtle prompts. It was just a fairly direct you need to accept Jesus and get saved movie. But there have been more subtle ones like James Cameron's Avatar. Oh my upset stomach. Now, if you're an Avatar fan, I'm issuing a trigger warning. That movie might as well have had a sweaty revival preacher standing there with a megaphone out on a soapbox for how preachy it was. Take a deep breath with me. Take a deep breath. Breathe. In, out. It was just a movie. It was a sermon. And the sermon was, capitalism is bad. Big business is bad. Human existence is bad for the rest of the pristine universe. And then it was just a horrid joke. We had to have the cigarettes are bad sermon mixed in there. Because I don't know about you, but me, I simply didn't know before that 2009 movie, when I was an innocent lad of 48 years old, that cigarette smoking was bad for you. Oh. Yes, it was a brilliant and exceptional piece of special effects and cinematography, but it was an embarrassingly plain, in-your-face piece of propaganda. I walked out of the theater that night feeling really used, and I was just a bit angry too, because I don't like paying $10 to hear a sermon. So, as you're watching or as you're reflecting later on the movie, as I often do for a few days, ask yourself, what were the values being suggested or critiqued? Did they do that well? Did it work? Number 3, integrity. This is a harder one to identify, but it goes toward coherency, fidelity, truthfulness. Was the story true to itself? It's not that movies can't be about deceit or duplicity, but the movie needs to be consistent and true in the unpacking of the chosen theme. So, for example, was there ridiculous or surprising writing that magically resolved the ending? Was there a fittingness for the way the characters played their roles? Were there scenes that, as it turned out, had nothing to do with the story? Did the movie have integrity? Now, some of you, your blood pressure just went back down, but I picked on Avatar for being a sermon. It lacked integrity. It pretended to be a sci-fi flick, but it was really more of a means to an icky sermonic ending. Now, I want to give you an example of a much more subtle and an actually much more clever sermon. Did you ever see the truly beautiful, tragic movie Million Dollar Baby from 2004? It starred and was directed by Clint Eastwood, and then Hilary Swank and Morgan Freeman were also starring in it. And it was a story set in Los Angeles about an Irish female boxer from Missouri, Maggie Fitzgerald, who wanted to prove herself to someone who she very much esteemed, her trainer, who was Clint Eastwood. She wanted to prove herself to her disinterested family. But the movie was far more subtle than just a boxing movie. It was really a story about the beauty of relationship. I'm not kidding you. Watching the story take us through the characters and the tensions and the life struggles and the beauty of a totally fitting love between an old grumpy boxing trainer and his female boxing pupil. And when I say love, it had nothing whatsoever to do with sex. I'm not kidding you guys. I fought back tears almost the entire film, and I finally busted out in free flowing tears at the end. Because the movie producers, the crew, the actors, the editors, they all worked me, marvelously worked my imagination and my emotions. But they did it with integrity. In fact, when Tanya and I showed the movie at our home to a group of college students, they were all crying or near tears at the end. They were so emotionally pleased. But then, during our reflection, our discussion of the movie, I asked them whether they would have resolved the movie the way the writers did, and pretty much all of them said no, it goes against my Christian convictions. So what had happened? The movie itself was so true to its direction, so true to the reality of human struggle, so beautifully done, so full of integrity, that the students were all emotionally happy with the ending, even though they admitted intellectually that the ending conflicted with their Christian commitments. And again, Million Dollar Baby did not resolve the way that I, a Christian theologian, would have wanted it to resolve, but the way that Clint Eastwood, the director, developed it across the 2 hours and 10 minutes was completely full of integrity. The characters were true to themselves, even though they went through some tortured existential states. The storyline had no throwaway scenes. Every shot, every angle, every scene contributed to the flow that Eastwood wanted me to see and feel. The energy, drive, motion of the entire film took me in an honest manner to the conclusion, and it was so subtle, so careful that it worked seamlessly, even though I didn't like it at the ethical level. So is there integrity? Number 4, character development. Now, I will admit to you that a movie can resolve the tension or the situation without having had much character development. Depends on the kind of the movie, but for me, if there's no character development, I don't usually care how the movie ends. If we don't have good reasons, subtly developed reasons, to care about the subjects in the story, then we won't don't much need to care how the movie concludes. So, for example, trigger warning, except for the last Thor movie, Ragnarok, 2017, right? Which laughed at itself and had fun with itself. Except for the last Thor movie, I've refused to go see the last couple years' worth of comic book movies. Several of them, including the Captain America one, caused me to fall asleep in the theater, and I'm not kidding. Just because it's Batman doesn't mean I'll give my affections to the story. Just because it's Superman doesn't mean I'll actually care at the great cataclysmic ending. I want the characters to grow on me. I want to care about caring about the characters. So for me, the most excellent movies involve character development. I want to see progression or growth or unpacking or at least growth in their awareness or realizations, or I got to have some reason to emotionally commit myself to a character or the characters. Number 5, when you watch a movie, try to see where the good, the true, and the beautiful might be present. These are subtle qualities, and I know too many Christians look past these. But if the movie concludes for us with something honorable, wise, compassionate, or praiseworthy, we can celebrate that as Christians for participating in the good. If a movie shows us along the way or at the final resolution important things that are true to reality, true to human nature, true about godly justice or godly mercy, we can celebrate those as Christians as participating in the true. And there are just a million ways that something can be beautiful without it having to have a Jesus sticker on it. Things like honesty, sacrifice, integrity, service to the common good, grace, truth, fidelity, self-deprecating humor, relationship. There are so many ways that movie makers can hold out the beautiful to us. Now, for me, the very best movies, despite what the propagandists at the Oscars annually imply, every year they try to stick their mug in our face. I don't want to swear, but it's amazing what they do. The very best movies weave together all those things I've noted above. In the greatest movie ever made, yes, it's my new number 1, for the past 10 years, No Country for Old Men, we get to watch a story that has all of the above qualities. It has philosophical packing galore, pragmatism and existentialism and nihilism. They are all woven together into a haunting recipe of love and catastrophe and tragedy. O.M. goodness. The ending is so perfect, so true to the philosophy of the villain that it nearly stopped my heart. No Country for Old Men has values. Let's see, what were those values? Oh yeah, fidelity, 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 for good and for bad. Fidelity, just stunning. Over and over and over what they did at that level. It was just gorgeous. Integrity. In No Country for Old Men, every character was true to herself, himself. Every scene contributed to the overall mood, depiction. And again, the ending was just 100% true to the philosophy of the movie's entire direction. It was just a wonder. Character development. Every single substantial character in No Country for Old Men went through some turmoil, anguish, horror, some gauntlet, and came out different in the end. And honestly, I learned about human nature from all 5 of the main subjects and their development in the movie, even the villain. No Country for Old Men very much involved the good and the true and the beautiful. Despite the fact that this was a very dark, deeply brooding, very macabre story, it continually held out the good and the true and the beautiful for us in dozens of ways. Now, that was clear back in 2008. It won Oscars for Best Picture, Best Actor in a Supporting Role, Javier Bardem, Best Director, Joel and Ethan Coen, Best Adapted Screenplay. I'm really not sure how Josh Brolin, Tommy Lee Jones, and Kelly MacDonald didn't all also win Oscars for their own roles. It was just a totally gripping, totally mind-blowing movie displaying tragic excellence. Anyway, boys and girls, that's how I watch and analyze movies. It's also rather how I watch and analyze pop culture. It's also how I observe and analyze fine art. So let's watch and enjoy pop art. It's not all demonic, but it's not all amazing. There are gradations of bad mixed together with gradations of good. In that way, it's all rather like human nature. You can find me on Facebook, Patreon, go make a pledge. You can also contact me, subscribe, go to my webpage, www.uncensoredunprofessor.com. We're slowly building that webpage out. And my next several episodes are going to have to do with, why does morality matter? If Jesus died so that we can go to heaven, why does morality matter? Why should Christians, why should the church care about morality? Thanks for listening today. I hope that you go and enjoy movies more richly and become a more honest critic for thinking with me, because you know how I like to end it. Turn your brains on, everybody.